Hello, I'm back within 6 months this time. If you've watched any of my videos, you'd know that A, I have an unhealthy obsession with From Software, and B, I talk a lot of shit about Dark Souls 2, with the vast majority of it being well earned. It might come as a surprise then to hear that Dark Souls 2 is both the first From Software game I played and my absolute favourite. For why that is, I'll save most of my reasoning for the generic video essay about Dark Souls 2 every single white male YouTuber makes at some point, and skip to the main point of this video, a weapon that is as obscure as it is painful to use, and as hype as fuck as it is terrible, the Ivory Straight Sword. Or, for the sake of this video, the Dark Souls equivalent of a... I'll explain on the way. While I make an appropriate character, I'll try and justify why this video deserved to follow this one. The Ivory Straight Sword is simply swag as hell, but has so many insanely bad qualities, especially for how late in the game it is found, that similar to my Gwyn video, I wanted to give it a share of the limelight for once, as well as provide an extremely obnoxious challenge for the later half of the game. For this run, I'd obviously only be doing direct damage with lightsabers, and etc etc. Also make sure an aesthetic is my starting gift. Now, onto the run. The Ivory Straight Sword has enormous stat requirements, 40 dex to be exact. Considering I'm unable to do damage with anything other than the ivory, and Dark Souls 2 is also far more linear and therefore has much less area to run around in before I get to a boss choke point, I need to find a way to farm enough levels without dealing damage. Fortunately, I have a method in mind. I head over to Hides and convince the Dragon Rider to take a dip, earning me 12k souls, plus his soul on top. Unfortunately though, this only gets me the 30 dex, which is exactly why I started with the aesthetic. I make my case for the second time and he agrees the water does look nice, and 24k souls and 6k from his soul later, I'm up to 40 dex and a little extra in health as well. Now that I can actually use it, let's talk about the Ivory Straight Sword. First up with the weirdly good. It looks cool. First of all, it uses the Straight Sword moveset, which is reasonably fast, and notably does strike damage for some reason, which will greatly help in the later portion of the run, where every single boss on the planet is wearing chunky armor. The main positive though, and the main reason I wanted to do this run actually, is the heavy attack. This attack does a ridiculous amount of damage compared to the regular attacks, like 3 times as much, even more so if you hit the handle and the blade, and feels incredible to land. However, that was just the positives. The negatives are a much more impactful list. First of all, this weapon has 0 scaling and just average base damage, meaning I'd be doing atrocious damage with regular hits very, very quickly. Secondly, every single swing, hit or not, uses durability, 10 to be exact, with a max of 25 swings before breaking. Third, and probably the single worst part of this weapon, the sheer amount of fucking stamina it chews through. Even the regular attacks eat through it at a stupid pace. What this all means together, and as I'm sure you're gathering is the reason why I thought of this challenge run, is that I'd be relying almost exclusively on the extremely slow, 0 hyper armor, terrible tracking, and incredibly stylish heavy attack. The price of fashion souls is unimaginably girthy, but by the lord do I know how to handle it. Weapon and challenge run context in hand, let's get going. My first step is the Stone Ring, as considering I'd be committing an insane recovery to each heavy attack, ensuring a stun will massively help. The last giant is the first on my list, and despite not being a challenge, does gently poke its finger into the absolute stink hole that is this build's biggest flaw. A single heavy attack literally uses all of my stamina, meaning all I can do is trade hits currently. This is a recurring issue. Because I'm a big dumb idiot though, I just push all my souls into health, which in hindsight is probably just as useful, since the early portion of the game isn't exactly challenging. Case in point, Pursuer, who can be countered by the archaic technique of slowly strafing to the right. An unupgraded, unbuffed heavy attack does like 1/6 of his health. If this game ever gets remastered, the Pursuer really deserves some love. The poor guy is such a cool concept, but the only thing I feel pursued by is impotence. Onto the Bastille. While I run around and collect stuff, it's worth noting the few damage increases I can actually get aside from just upgrading. The Ring of Blades, which I just got, incrementally increases physical damage per ring tier. For whatever reason, the Ivory does physical damage. Strike, like I mentioned before. So anything that affects physical damage applies here too. This means Flynn's Ring will also add to my small damage number, as well as Sacred Oath, which I naturally completely forgot about, but would have been very cool. There's a handful of other options as well, but I'll explain them when I get to them. Anyways, I one-shot everything in the Bastille, and continue my collectathon in the Shaded Woods, with the branch I got. Even early as this, the Ivory is really starting to show its weaknesses. There's too many enemies here to pull off a heavy attack with such a low poise, and my regular attacks use insane amounts of stamina. Just some lovely food for thought. I take out my first Forsworn of many, and grab the Chloranthy Ring, which is stupidly useful for this run. Okay, I am graciously donated the second Dragon Ring, which boosts everything useful for this run, especially the stamina. Everything you could ever want. I upgrade for a staggering increase of 8 unscaling damage and detour to the wharf, which is pretty easily run through, except for the part where I ran out of durability and had to head back to Majula before the sentry. That's another cool thing to note about this sword. You can repair weapons during combat, but if it breaks, it's gone until the next blacksmith visit. So on top of stamina, fixing this was my next big issue. The sentry was easy, and I make it to the Bastille, again. With the Ruined Sentinel passage blocked off and my innate psychological inability to backtrack for a branch of yore, I cruise through, grabbing the Archdrake robes on the way, as I feel like they suit my Jedi-ish aesthetic I'm going for. There's basically nothing else here for me, so I head into the Lost Sinner as my first Great Soul. I didn't like the torches, so the lock-on is extra fun for this fight, and my complete lack of decent iframes make it kind of infuriating to fight her, but the Ivory Sword is just slightly overpowered, and I pull through on my second try. I'm still doing enough damage that my durability isn't a concern, but past this point, the boss HP bars are only going to inflate. And contrary to everything I've said in the past, I'm not a fan of inflation. Learning my lesson, I dump all of my souls into adaptability, and quickly breeze through Najka and the congregation, just to light the bonfires for later. I head down to the gutter, and honestly just explore for a bit. It's been absolutely eons since I've played through Dark Souls 2, and despite how literally gutted the gutter was in its final release, I still really like it. It kind of feels like a less cramped upper section of Blighttown. Watch this video. The robe really fits the look I'm going for, but I am really not feeling the helmet. It's making the screen hard to see with my cascade of nostalgic tears, so I decide to rock the hide set for a bit, even if it doesn't quite fit either. Making it to the Black Gulch, I have a fantastic time remembering why I like the aesthetic way more than the fucking area, and grab the Forgotten Key before heading into the Rotten. Now, the Rotten has a beautiful place in the Souls economy of Dark Souls 2, that being the second most efficient soul farm in the game. But he's only easy if you have a weapon to hit him with. That is the exact issue. He has so much health, necessitating the heavy attack spam, but his attacks are just fast enough to force a trade every time I go for one. And he actually does quite high damage, meaning the Rotten, for some weird reason, is the first proper challenge of this run. The solution is obvious: I cannot rely on heavy attacks for this fight. Therefore, I need the durability to withstand regular attack usage. Luckily, the solution is right in reach. I detour quickly to the Lost Bastille to grab the Bracing Knuckle Ring, which reduces durability consumption per ring tier, up to a max of half at +2. I try again and immediately prove myself wrong, as I just needed to be slightly more careful with the heavy attack usage. Sorry, Rotten, you almost had your spotlight. I light the bonfire and start the trek to the Iron Keep. I kill another Forsworn, say hi to Creighton, and beat the Skeleton Lords easily, which kind of surprised me. I assumed it would be kind of hard with the volume of enemies, but they all die in one hit anyways. I run around Harvest Valley on a little collectathon, maxing out my iframes as I do so, and generally just cruise through. The base areas of Dark Souls genuinely are not all that challenging. That's one thing I was really happy with in Elden Ring. They made the areas way more challenging, while also introducing checkpoints before the boss, making it a challenge to access and a challenge to defeat whatever it was, instead of just middling areas that you're forced to run back through that provide nothing but wasted times. Hot take, I know, but runbacks suck. Anyways, Earthen Peak, which I personally like, kicks my ass, and I slowly make my way around, saying hi to Pate and grabbing the bonfires. Before Mytha, I head back to Brightstone Cove to collect another of the scarce damage increases I can get, the engraved gauntlets. If you didn't know, these give a 5% chance for your attacks to do 50% extra damage. Now, I used these for the rest of the run, and I don't think I ever properly figured out whether they affect only the physical hilt hitting the enemy or also the blade. But regardless, extra damage is extra damage. Anyways, I take out Freya and knock off another bonfire, and also take out Mytha, using her souls to fully max my ADP. Now, before I continue on, my damage, or lack thereof, is really starting to annoy me. I'm not necessarily struggling right now, but this issue is only going to increase the more I ignore it. To that end, I grab the first DLC key, and head into Shoujo for a small adventure. I haven't been here in a very long time, and honestly, I just kind of roam around. I have a very clear memory of absolutely loving the 3 DLCs, especially the mazy layout of Shoujo. Not so much the bosses, I absolutely fucking hated them, especially Alana. Anyways, my goal here is another bit of extra damage, Flynn's Ring. This boosts physical damage by up to 50 depending on your total equip load. Basically, if I don't level it past an iron, I will always have 50 extra damage. I leave Shoujo behind for now and head towards the Iron Keep. I try way too many times to parry this one night, in order to practice a specific Info skip for a certain future video, before remembering I am in fact lobotomized, and eventually just give up and backstab him. I actually get the helmet to drop, and immediately can tell that it just fits perfectly with my aesthetic. I tickle Dennis for an uncomfortable amount of time, mainly him, I was super into it, until the dickhead actually strafes my heavy attack and backstabs me. The next go, I get the first lever, but am whittled down and roll caught. I finally get rid of Dennis on the next attempt, and can then slowly progress, grabbing some upgrade materials on the way, and continuing on through the keep. If you're wondering why I skipped the Smelter Demon, a reasonably difficult boss, it's because I will literally be fighting the harder version of him and his run back later on, so I can't be bothered to backtrack. As you can probably imagine, the latter half of the keep isn't difficult. I even one-shot the turtles, provided I hit with the handle as well, and the Iron King is the Iron King. That's all 4 great ones down. Aldia says hi, and then I finally level my stamina a little. It doesn't make a huge difference, but it's still good for later on. I also traded my petrified somethings to ideally get some upgrade materials, but get 2 hammers instead. Okay. I also upped my ivory to +3, another insane 8 damage increase. All the great ones are down, meaning all that's left of the base game is the second half. I head up to the Shrine of Winter and I'm actually really glad that this is the one Great One soul that isn't placed into your inventory immediately, because I actually really enjoy backtracking. Once I finally get inside the castle, I very easily cruise through. There's only a few things left of interest to this build, and none of them are in here. I literally 2-shot the Archer Rider, and the other one is nearly as easy. The second half has much more annoying enemies, but it doesn't take long before the Mirror Knight enters the stage, and exits just as quickly. I do massive damage to him, since the ivory does strike damage, and I can very easily just strafe his wide swings and get a safe heavy attack off. I grab the Spell Quartz ring in uneasy preparation and head into the shrine. I have a small confession to make. Despite the sheer amount of flack this area has garnered over the years, I genuinely do not hate it. Yes, it doesn't play the best, but I think the massive polarizing reception this area got is mainly due to the expectations set by the areas leading up to it. Literally every single area in this game can be ran through up to this point, as I have literally just demonstrated. The bosses aren't even difficult. There isn't some mid-game menace like Ornstein and Smo to prepare for. Everything is just a slight curve upwards, with Drangleic Castle being perfect difficulty for a newer player getting to that point. The shrine forces you to actually pick your fights, and either strategically run through, or slowly cut your way through the mages. I really like this. I just wish it was more obvious that that's what's expected of you. I wish this area had a smaller introductory chunk first, similar to the Dark Souls 3 Angels, that actually showed you the mages are a threat here, and you need to be more careful. I think if some form of that was implemented, and it was made obvious what the main threat in the area was, it wouldn't get so much shit from the community. That's my 2 cents anyway. Also, the lore is amazing, and this area has so many cool secrets and is just insanely pretty. Shrine of Amana, underappreciated and unloved. Anyways, I kill the Seaman of Dong and am jump scared yet again by Aldia, before continuing on. The crypt is up next, and it actually holds something relevant to my build. I run through the first chunk, especially savouring the dipshit level design of the rocks that require you to hit them to get through. I get what they were going for. If you swing without thinking, you summon extra enemies, but still it feels clunky and slow. Eventually I find the bracing knuckle ring +2, which halves my durability usage, effectively doubling the amount of swings I get out of the ivory. This is especially important, as a heavy attack just leaves me way too vulnerable to counter hits. And with how hard late DLC bosses hit, I may need to rely on regular attacks. Velstadt isn't too hard, he's just a solid boss fight overall, despite some interesting hitboxes, and a fairly simple design for such an important and late game character. His soul can actually be used to make Sacred Oath, which increases attack and defense, but I completely forgot about it, so I never ended up using it. Anyways, I grabbed the King's Ring, used Velstadt's soul in a very calculated play, and head up to Aldia's Keep, which is similarly not too bad. I take out another Forsworn, do idiotic damage to the dragon, and continue forwards to the area. I collect another piece of my nearly complete build, the third dragon ring, which is especially useful for the stamina gain, and after skipping through the dialogue, grab the Ashen Mist Heart. From here on, there's only the giant memories, Vendrick himself, and the throne, and one other fight for the base game. With my shitty durability in mind, I decide to quickly take out the Watcher and Defender first, to avoid the gauntlet. As you can imagine though, it's more than a little difficult to pull off a single attack, especially a heavy attack, on two tanky, hard-hitting morons who can't walk more than a centimetre away from each other. And so my hand was forced. I simply had no choice but to defeat the video game itself. That's a complete lie, this was absolutely possible, but doing it this way was really funny. On his own, the defender just kind of embarrasses himself. I then move on to everyone's favourite soul farm, the Giant Lord. Why do I call him that? Oh, you'll see. For now, the big guy just keels over fairly quickly, and I can move on to Nishandra. What a sincere waste of a cool design, honestly. Why couldn't she be a nimble Shovel Knight-esque death, instead of having a massive dress that makes her move like a slug? This fight is actually pretty painful for my build. I use so much stamina with my attacks that it is legitimately hard to sprint to the orbs, take them out, then attack Nishandra while having enough stamina to roll away. Not hard, but very annoying. She goes down on the third try. I try to feather out, but I just end up back at the throne, and as a result am forced to sit through 10 fucking minutes of unskippable credits. You can't fool me, From Software. I know only 3 people worked on this game, and exclusively when they were hungover. With that, the base game, and by extension, the easy part was done. It was time to round out my build, as much as I possibly could. First up was extra damage. I head to Drain Lake, and after burning an aesthetic, head to the throne room. 2 pursuers spawned here, and drop the Ring of Blades +2. The issue is that you need to kill both, and with such a slow, clunky weapon, it would be an absolute struggle, especially in New Game Plus. However, if you bait a longish attack animation, run out of the throne room and straight back in, it will despawn one of the pursuers, but keep the other one fighting you, allowing you to take out one, then come back later for the other one. Thank you, Yimfa. It combined 100 extra damage with Flynn's ring, and the Blade's ring is very nice. Now though, I had a different goal in mind. For this entire run so far, I had been slowly turning away from the side of the Jedi. Continuous exposure to Dark Souls 2 just warps your brain, and as a result, I was in pursuit of a different style of Fashion Souls. I quickly run through the memories and collect them, to make Vendrick take only a few years to kill instead of 20. With his soul, I head to Amana and... grab his set, namely the King's Leggings, which will fit perfectly with the next piece of this puzzle. This part is much more annoying though. I'm now hunting down another Forsworn, as with each one you kill, you unlock more of their set and weapons to purchase. The issue is that the piece I want, the chest, is the final unlock, and since I have already been killing the Forsworn, I now have to manually activate their invasion. The fucking issue is that it's RNG if they decide to show or not, so I just wait, and wait, and wait, and wait, running this one stupid path in the shrine over and over, until finally he shows up and I can claim my prize. Despite the pain, I think it's worth it. I just need to find a few younglings to demolish and I'm set. Also, I've just realised I've been calling them Forsworn after the morons in Skyrim.
Skyrim Shuffle.
But shh, it's okay, we're sticking with it now. There's one more piece of my Sith transformation though, and this piece is a more active part of the role. I head to the Grave of Saints and pick up Whisper of Despair. This fires a 0 damage projectile that, on hit, reduces defense, which considering how idiotic the resistances of the DLC bosses are and how low my damage is, I would absolutely need it. It also really fits with the build I'm going for. I don't meet the requirements yet though, and so the Giant Lord lives up to his nickname, and I tickle his ankles till I get enough souls. Finally, all the pieces had come together. It was time for the DLC. I'm able to one-shot the regular green soldiers, provided I hit with the hilt as well, but that is much harder to do as soon as more than one is around. Therefore, I just kind of run through. It's been an extremely long time since I explored this area. I genuinely think since like 2015, which was the first time I played this game, and also the first From Software game I played. The thing I absolutely love about these DLCs is that they have such a cool, self-contained story about each of them, and they are all extremely distinct with their level design, aesthetic, and gameplay they're going for. Shulva being an underground, trap-filled, poisonous temple is executed to fucking perfection, minus a certain boss fight later on. I honestly just play through this area normally. I've sincerely missed the feeling of playing Dark Souls style levels, and it's been so long since I played this game that I completely forgot the layout of this place. So much so that by the time I get to the bottom of the labyrinth, into the watery lair of the Imperfect, which I also absolutely fucking adore the aesthetic of, I completely forget the Dragonstone. I scour back through the temple, before finding it in a tiny inconspicuous chest that looks literally identical in placement to where you might find 3 Radiant Life Gems. That's my second and only other critique of this DLC. All 3 DLCs have a major item you need to find in the first half, but both the Iron and Ivory DLC foreshadow it at the start, and also make the super important item super important looking. Sure, this is a huge underground temple, and the Dragonstone is in the middle of it, so it would be hard to foreshadow its placement in the level, but I just wish you found it on like a massive altar surrounded by spikes and dragon statues or something. It would fit the theme and be way better placed. Anyways, with the stairs raised, I head down to Alana. Fun fact, this boss took by far the most tries in my first playthrough, next to Ava, Fume Knight, and Mitha. Another fun fact is that I can't even one-shot her skeletons. This fight is very, very one-sided, and Alana proves that point by roll-catching me after her skeletons combo me. Before I try again, I finally max out the Ivory Sword for barely any extra damage, but as long as it can one-shot the skeletons, I'm pretty safe. She always aura farms at the start of the fight, giving me an opportunity to get a Whisper and 2 heavy attacks off, and from there I need to just play safe and get heavy attacks in whenever I get the chance. At some point Velstadt will show up, and my only real chance is getting her low enough that I can just ignore him. She both breaks my poise with her attacks, and can TP away while I heavy attack though, both of which delay the fight. I do at least one-shot the skeletons now, provided I actually hit with the hilt as well. I get a crit on my heavy attack, and just to spite me, she spams Flame Swath until I eventually go for a heavy attack, and it hits me off screen. The entire fight, she just delays me, either interrupting me or spamming just enough to keep me at a distance, but eventually her luck runs out. I power through her attacks with how many life gems I have, and her final summon ends up being skeletons. And with that, it's done. Sin is up next, and while he does get me a few times, the jankiest dragon fight in the entire series goes down in stylish fashion. I love this boss, mainly for the spectacle, but the main challenge was getting past Alana. There's only one thing left in this DLC before I move on, and that's the Cave of the Dead. Oh my god, this is a mess. The Ivory Sword already struggled against NPCs and enemies who can dodge, and this fight has 3 of them, and all of them can break my poise. I have to fully commit to each heavy attack, and if they dodge, that's both stamina and durability gone, and I'm nearly guaranteed a damage trade at best, or just damage taken at worst. It doesn't help that this stupid sword is insanely slow. I obviously try to take out the archer first, but if I heavy attack him, I lose all my stamina and the other 2 catch up, and by the time I've sprinted up to him, I barely have the stamina for 2 light attacks. This fight takes an embarrassing amount of time. A solid 50-50 in terms of both skill issue and how crappy this sword is, but eventually, after burning through almost all of my heals, I cut Havel in half while he jumps at me. DLC 1 finished. I decide I am extremely sick of having my attacks interrupted, and give the Giant's Ring a try for a bit. I don't want to compromise my fashion, so this is all I've got for increasing my poise. On to DLC 2. Like I said before, I adore all 3 DLCs. I think they are the absolute pinnacle of this game, and in terms of self-contained story, level design, and general gameplay, they are on par with Shadow of the Erdtree. That said though, this is the weakest DLC for me. Not by a massive amount, it's more that it just has so much potential and only like 75% of it is realized. The bosses are fucking incredible, and difficult as well, which is very, very hard to do. But the level design is absolute cheeks. The elevators and vertical design of the tower had so much potential, and I think so much more could have been done, especially with the second half, where the tower gets darker and the ash-covered statues are looming in the main chamber. If there was more going on in that central chamber and some of the enemies were moved down there instead, I think this DLC would be perfected. That's to say nothing of the atrocity of the Iron Passage. Anyways, there's nothing in this DLC for me to collect for my build, so I just explore it, same with Shoujo. I haven't experienced this in a long time, and it's cool to sift back through memories. After I activate the elevators, it's time for the big man himself, Fume Knight. This guy fucking terrorized me back in the day, and not much has changed with how slow my weapon is and how quick he is to punish me for it. He has a tendency to dodge when you attack from the front, so my goal for the fight is to circle around him, which will avoid most of his first phase attacks, and heavy attack while he's turning around, since he can't dodge while he does. The second phase is much worse though, as he does like double the damage, but hits in AoEs, and is still just as fast. I do have a trick for this though. Whenever he does an attack that makes his big sword glow red, like here, he actually can't phase transition while it's glowing. Meaning if I can bait out the correct attack at low enough HP, the majority of the fight can be fought in phase 1, which is far, far easier for this build to handle. With this strategy in mind, he puts up a good fight, but ultimately he goes down and I grab the second crown. This DLC isn't finished yet though. There's 2 more bosses to deal with, and I decide to deal with the more pleasant one first. Sir Alon is an absolute masterclass of boss design, paired with the most moronic runback possible. My favourite part is that if you spend too long in the final corridor, the dickhead from up the top can follow you down, shoot you, and waste a heal. Just a really cool fact. The fight itself is just as difficult as Fume Knight for the same reason. My sword is either clunky and slow, or clunky and fast with tiny damage, and both options use a shitload of stamina. I have to be really careful in terms of picking my opportunities to both damage and heal. It's way too easy to just snowball into a cycle of healing, getting interrupted, and so on until I die. Thankfully my agility is maxed out, so I can dodge most of the hitboxes with ease, with the only scary one being the lingering hitbox of his grab. But so long as I stay calm and attack in specific windows, I can manage it. I actually really wanted to get the secret death animation, where you beat him and take no damage, but this weapon and myself are too shitty to pull it off. The bracing knuckle ring is my absolute savior in this fight. It is extremely rare I get a heavy attack off, so I'm forced to just rely on chipping him down. Even then, it comes down to the absolute wire, but I get him in the end. One left to go. The Iron Passage, the absolute skid mark of this DLC, and something I've never actually completed. I beat the Cave of the Dead back in the day, as it really wasn't too difficult of a challenge area, but this zone gives me nightmares to this day. What's funny though, is that I beat it on my first try, with an infinitely shittier weapon than the dark infused greatsword I used in my original playthrough. The blue smelter demon used to get a ton of flack for switching up his attack timings from the regular demon. Half the time he'll delay his attacks enormously, which caught the vast majority of players off guard. The hilarious thing though is that I have played an enormous amount of Elden Ring, where the majority of the big name bosses delay their attacks to stress you out and force a bad roll. As a result, this guy is fucking easy even with my clunky weapon. Just a funny little thing I realised while I fought him. Anyways, with Wojak Mask in hand, that's 2 DLCs and 2 crowns down. 1 to go and arguably the best of them. I make my way through Aleum Lois, reminiscing massively as I do. Like I mentioned before, I fucking adore these DLCs. I think they capture the essence of a side adventure as opposed to the main story, way more compared to the other Dark Souls games. Don't get me wrong, Artorias of the Abyss is the singular best part of Dark Souls 1, tied with the first half of the game, and the Ring City is stupidly fantastic, but both of those DLCs feel like it's a natural progression of the game, rather than being DLC or additional content. The thing I love about the 3 DLCs is that they each have their own self-contained story, and little stories within stories, like Sir Yorg in the first one, and the King's pets and their roles in the third one. Each one feels distinct in terms of what you find out by playing it, and discovery is the biggest motivator to continue forward in these games. It's part of why I fucking adored Shadow of the Erdtree, because it feels separate from the main game, and therefore you get absolutely lost in the narrative and separate world, because it feels totally new. Anyways, onto Arbor, this goddamn menace. She absolutely terrorized me in my first playthrough. I think my highest deaths might actually have been to her. This build is atrocious against her, as a little fun fact as well. Whisper of Death can't hit her. Since she's still technically invisible, it doesn't track her. Therefore, I'm stuck with crappy damage. Like with Sir Alon and Fume Knight, she is just insanely quick in terms of reactionary attacks and being able to dodge, which puts my heavy attacks out of the question. And similarly, I'm forced to chip her down with regular attacks. It makes me kind of annoyed. The whole gimmick of this weapon is the flashy and strong heavy attack, and I'm completely locked out of using it. Anyways, she eventually goes down, and I unfreeze Aleum Lois. I know I've said it a billion times, but I love being able to technically experience these DLCs for the first time again, since it's been so long. One of my favourite parts of this DLC is the knight you find on top of the mountain, and the path you take to get there, winding throughout the city, under the bridge and through the caves. It really gives the level some depth, and makes it feel enormous, which I just love. I loved the aesthetic of the ringed city and the stuff that came with it, but I don't think the level design is anywhere close to the verticality at play here. Running across a flat black lake and across a flat bridge just doesn't have the same vibe as twisting through battlements and tunnels and buildings. It's so cool. Also, oh my god, Zully wrecks me. I've literally been subscribed for years. I don't know why I'm being obliterated so hard. Eventually I get all the knights, and before I fight the single best boss fight in the game, I decide to tackle Frigid first. What a fountain of missed potential. The funny thing is though, is that this area is actually really fun with summons. I honestly feel like this is the only area in the game that should have automatic summons, since without it, it's just a massive slog. But trekking through a snowy wasteland with literally a D&D party, and fighting the two cats at the end feels like an adventure. Speaking of D&D party, however, we're missing a member. We have a cleric, an archer, and the stock standard Sith Lord that comes with every D&D party. But we need a barbarian, as the reindeer and the bosses themselves are just too tanky otherwise. To that end, I hunt down Vengal's body, who I forgot was moved from the Freya bonfire to the Shaded Woods. And after taking down the budget promised consort, oh yeah, it does go that fucking deep, we finally have a band together. Now, you might call me cheap for summoning for this, but keep in mind, this is the Frigid Outskirts. That's the end of my argument. I actually do highly recommend giving this a try, by the way, with a full band of NPC adventurers. This area is genuinely really enjoyable. The cats take a good bit of effort, and it comes down to the absolute wire, once again, with my heals decimated, but our band pulls through. My point rests. This is a fun area. All that's left is the king himself. My squad drops in, and despite how tanky the knights are, I do enough damage to help out my buddies. We slowly take them out, until it's just me and my duo against the king, the true master of the shitty, non-scaling strike damage for some reason lightsaber. I try so hard to keep him alive, and he diverts aggro fantastically, but he can't hold on forever, and after taking a hit meant for me, my friend falls. It's just me and the king, and after a fantastic lightsaber duel, he goes down on the first try, and I finally get a new weapon. Oh, you thought the build was finished? Sorry, let me remind you, the run is called Lightsaber only, and I believe I just got a new lightsaber. There's a bit of work to be done before I can use it though. First up, I say hi to my old friend, so that I can get enough strength to two-hand it. One-handing it just uses it as a regular greatsword, but two-handing it activates the lightsaber, massively increasing its reach and damage potential. Similar to the ivory sword, if you hit with the sword itself and the light part, it deals way more damage. It also just does much more damage, actually scales as well, and also does bleed damage. It does use durability per swing, but honestly it barely matters unless you spend ages fighting through an area. Genuine fantastic weapon. I do have to farm a bit first though, which is as fun as it sounds, and looks. I eventually get it to +4, and after realizing I need 5 fucking bones to get it to +5, I just cope with it as is. Just know that this could have been stronger. Now I'm at the end of the game. There's only the throne left to go, except for one more challenge, another one that I've never actually beaten before. I head through all the chasms, which are honestly just a slog. The health pools of the NPCs are so fucking chunky that it takes eons. But eventually I clear them all and head into Dark Lurker. Dark Lurker is unanimously the hardest boss of the base game, and it's still quite a challenge years later, and is pure testament to how strong this sword is. It's worth noting that the extremely strong heavy attack thrust I'm using here actually would benefit from the Leo ring, both the lightsaber part and the actual blade. Had I been bothered to go get it, this fight would have gone twice as fast, but as it is, he still gets decimated, and for my first time as well. There's just one fight left. I head to the throne, and even though for some weird reason the Watcher and Defender are still alive, I squish them pretty easily, and then Nishandra wants a round 2 as well, for some weird reason. Maybe it's because I'm doing the Aldia ending? Regardless, they all get squished, and it's time for the singular shitty part of all 3 DLCs, this fucking travesty of a boss fight. What a fantastic way to wrap up an intriguing, integral character to Dark Souls 2's active and overall story by making him a flaming blob with 3 attacks. This fight is so goddamn boring, and it makes me weep internally experiencing it, even more so when he kills me a few times. I've actually got nothing left to say. I consider using the Ivory Sword for the final hit as a nice send-off to the MVP for this run, but this fight doesn't deserve the spectacle. I hit him hard enough to break the Ivory King's sword, and finally get the singular good ending in the entire series. Despite how massively clunky the Ivory Straightsword was, it actually was pretty fun to mess up the usual formula of dodging and R1ing for once. Playing patiently actually got me to read the tells of the bosses way more than I usually would, and it honestly made me appreciate the fights a bit more. I really did just want an excuse to play through Dark Souls 2 again, to be honest. I have a deep adoration for this game, despite its flaws, and you can take that as a promise that a generic white male video essay on a Dark Souls 2 retrospective is in the works. Thanks for watching, goodbye.